This report explores the concept of the absurd life, a way of living that consciously rejects metaphysical or ultimate hope, such as the expectation of cosmic justice, divine intervention, or guaranteed meaning, while embracing life with lucid courage, freedom, and passion. Drawing primarily on Albert Camus philosophy, especially the myth of Sisyphus and the stranger, the report situates absurdism within the broader context of existentialism, nihilism, stoicism, Nietzschean thought, Viktor Frankl's logotherapy, and modern psychological research on hope and resilience. The central thesis is that an absurd life is one in which a person clearly recognizes the universe's indifference, refuses both despair and comforting illusions, and actively chooses a stance of revolt and passionate engagement without expecting ultimate victory or transcendence. Such a life requires a radical honesty, acceptance of mortality and suffering, and a commitment to creating meaning through actions, values, and presence in the here and now. By analyzing philosophical, literary, and psychological perspectives, this report aims to clarify what it truly means to live without hope but with courage, and to assess whether such a life is both intellectually coherent and psychologically viable. The term absurd in philosophy does not simply mean that life is chaotic, illogical, or crazy. In Albert Camus' work, absurdity arises from the relationship between human beings and the universe. Specifically, the tension between our deep desire for meaning and the universe's indifferent silence. Humans naturally seek clarity, purpose, justice, and coherence in life. We ask questions like, why am I here? What is the purpose of suffering? Does anything truly matter? These are fundamental existential concerns. Yet, when we look to the universe for definitive answers, we encounter a world that offers no guarantees, no cosmic justice, and no inherent meaning. This conflict, the clash between human longing and the universe's silence, is what Camus calls the absurd. Importantly, the absurd is not a property of the world alone, nor merely a feature of human psychology. It is the relationship between the two. Recognizing the absurd can be psychologically intense. For many, this realization triggers despair, existential anxiety, or even thoughts of suicide. Camus identifies a related danger: the temptation to flee from absurdity through illusions or metaphysical systems, a process he calls philosophical suicide, such as seeking false comfort in religion, ideology, or other transcendent explanations. Camus' insight is radical. Facing the absurd does not require despair or resignation. Instead, it opens the possibility for a life lived with clarity, courage, and passionate engagement, even in the absence of ultimate answers. This tension between the harsh reality of the universe and the human capacity to respond creatively is the foundation for what Camus later describes as the absurd life. Albert Camus begins his exploration of the absurd with a stark, uncompromising question. If life has no ultimate meaning, is suicide the logical response? He considers this the only truly serious philosophical problem, because it forces us to confront the consequences of the universe's indifference, ending one's life to escape the tension of meaninglessness. Camus rejects this as a surrender to despair. Though understandable as a human reaction, it avoids confronting the fundamental challenge of the absurd, seeking refuge in metaphysical or religious systems that promise meaning, salvation, or justice. Examples include unquestioning faith in God, belief in historical destiny, or ideologies claiming ultimate truth. Camus considers this a form of self-deception. It avoids the absurd by pretending that meaning exists beyond what is observable. Both responses, in Camus' view, are escapes from reality, ways to deny the tension between human longing and the universe's indifference. Instead, Camus proposes a third path: revolt. Revolt is not a denial of reality, nor an expectation of reward. It is a conscious choice to live fully despite the absurd, to embrace life's challenges without resorting to illusions or surrender. This revolt forms the foundation of the absurd life, where clarity, courage, and engagement replace both despair and false hope. By framing life as a question of suicide versus revolt, Camus forces a radical reconsideration of human existence. Life may have no ultimate meaning, yet it is still worth living if met with conscious defiance and passionate presence. Camus proposes that once we recognize the absurd, we can respond in three interconnected ways: revolt, freedom, and passion. These are not abstract ideals, but practical attitudes that define what it means to live without hope but with courage. Revolt is the first and most fundamental response. It is a continuous, conscious confrontation with meaninglessness, a refusal to surrender to despair or seek false comfort. Revolt is not a one-time decision, but a permanent stance, a persistent no to illusions and resignation, and a simultaneous yes to life as it exists. Camus describes revolt as a constant confrontation between man and his own obscurity. It is not aspiration, for it is devoid of hope. That revolt is the certainty of a crushing fate, without the resignation that ought to accompany it. In other words, revolt is courage in the face of an indifferent universe, without expecting any reward or ultimate triumph. Freedom arises naturally from the acceptance of absurdity. Once one acknowledges that the universe does not impose meaning, judgment, or ultimate purpose, one becomes radically free. There is no higher authority, no cosmic script, and no ultimate referee to dictate how one should live. This freedom is not a license for arbitrary or unethical behavior. Instead, it is the opportunity to choose one's actions, values, and projects deliberately and responsibly. By acting within reality rather than clinging to illusions, the absurd individual exercises lucid responsibility, making choices for their intrinsic significance rather than for promised outcomes. Finally, passion reflects the intensity with which the absurd life is lived. Camus' hero does not retreat into cold detachment. On the contrary, the recognition of life's limits calls for deeper engagement with the present, experiencing love, work, creativity, and human connection fully and consciously. In the myth of Sisyphus, Camus famously concludes that the struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Here, happiness is not the hope of escaping absurdity or attaining ultimate meaning. It emerges from embracing life's tasks and challenges with energy, attention, and commitment. Living passionately in the present, despite knowing there is no guaranteed reward, is at the heart of the absurd life. Together, revolt, freedom, and passion form a coherent response to the absurd. One does not wait for hope or salvation, but chooses to live courageously and fully in a world without guarantees. This is the foundation for understanding what it truly means to live without hope, but with courage. To understand what Camus means by living without hope, it is essential to distinguish between types of hope. Camus primarily critiques metaphysical hope, which assumes that some ultimate force, God, fate, or history, will guarantee meaning, justice, or salvation. Such hope often functions as a way to avoid the confrontation with reality, providing comfort at the cost of honesty and engagement. By believing that the universe will eventually make sense or reward one's actions, individuals postpone living fully in the present and risk philosophical surrender. Camus contrasts this with practical, goal-oriented engagement. Rejecting metaphysical hope does not require abandoning action, responsibility, or planning for the future. One can still pursue projects, create art, or care for others, fully aware that the universe offers no guarantees. In this sense, living without hope does not mean nihilistic paralysis. It means acting without reliance on ultimate validation, finding meaning through effort and choice rather than through promises of cosmic justice. Modern psychology complicates the picture. Research consistently shows that a sense of hope, defined as goal-directed motivation combined with belief in one's ability to achieve those goals, correlates with better mental health, resilience, and life satisfaction. Adolescents and adults with higher hope scores tend to cope more effectively with stress, experience less depression, and maintain greater life satisfaction. From this perspective, a total loss of hope appears psychologically dangerous. The tension is clear. Philosophically, Camus and other absurdist thinkers view metaphysical hope as a form of evasion or self-deception. Psychologically, some sense of future-oriented motivation seems essential for mental health. The absurd life navigates this tension by dropping illusions of guaranteed outcomes while maintaining active, courageous engagement with life. In other words, one abandons hope for ultimate meaning but preserves the drive to live, act, and create within the bounds of reality. By rejecting metaphysical hope but embracing conscious, courageous engagement, the absurd individual achieves a form of freedom and authenticity that distinguishes absurdism from both naive optimism and despair. To better understand the nature of living without hope but with courage, it is useful to compare absurdism with related philosophical frameworks, including nihilism, existentialism, and other thinkers who explored meaning, suffering, and human freedom. Nihilism asserts that life has no inherent meaning and often leads to despair, apathy, or indifference. In its extreme form, nihilism suggests that nothing matters, and this can result in moral or psychological paralysis. In contrast, existentialism, particularly in the work of Sartre and de Beauvoir, acknowledges the absence of intrinsic meaning but emphasizes the human capacity to create meaning through choices, projects, and authentic engagement. Existentialism introduces freedom as a creative force, but still often allows some form of hope in human endeavors or transcendence. Absurdism, as formulated by Camus, occupies a unique space between these two. Like nihilism, it recognizes the universe's indifference and the absence of cosmic meaning. Yet unlike nihilism, it refuses surrender. Unlike existentialism, it does not posit the creation of ultimate meaning as a solution. Instead, it emphasizes lucid confrontation, rebellion, and passionate engagement. In this sense, courage in absurdism is defined not by hope of success, but by the persistent choice to act and live fully in a meaningless universe. Camus' approach also resonates with other influential thinkers. Nietzsche promotes life-affirming pessimism and the concept of amor fati, or the love of one's fate. He encourages affirming life, including its suffering, without expecting ultimate reward or external justification. Paul Tillich, in The Courage to Be, describes courage as the affirmation of one's own existence despite anxiety, guilt, and the awareness of death. Courage, for Tillich, allows individuals to confront existential concerns honestly. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, emphasizes that humans can find meaning even in unavoidable suffering. According to Frankl, despair arises when individuals fail to choose an attitude toward their fate. Courage is manifested in the stance one takes toward life's challenges. Across these perspectives, a common thread emerges. Courage is the capacity to affirm life in the face of uncertainty, suffering, and meaninglessness. What distinguishes Camus' absurdism is the explicit rejection of metaphysical hope. For the absurd hero, the universe offers no guarantees, and yet one can live fully and ethically through revolt, freedom, and passion. By situating absurdism among these philosophical traditions, it becomes clear that living courageously without hope is a coherent, if demanding, response to the human condition, a stance that neither naively optimizes nor collapses into despair. Camus' concept of the absurd hero exemplifies what it means to live fully in a world without guarantees. The absurd hero is defined not by naive optimism or faith in cosmic justice, but by lucid awareness of life's indifference and a conscious choice to engage with it courageously. First, the absurd hero clearly understands the universe's absurdity. There is no ultimate meaning, no divine plan, no cosmic justice to reward virtue or punish wrongdoing. This awareness is uncomfortable and often psychologically demanding, yet forms the foundation of genuine freedom. By confronting reality without illusions, the absurd hero refuses both despair and escapism. Second, The hero rejects both suicide and philosophical evasion. Physical suicide is a surrender to despair, while philosophical suicide, seeking consolation in religion, ideology, or metaphysical promises, is a refusal to face the absurd honestly. The absurd hero, in contrast, chooses to live with full consciousness of life's limits. This refusal is a radical act of revolt, asserting the value of life on one's own terms rather than as dictated by external meaning. Third, the hero embodies revolt, freedom, and passion. Revolt manifests as a constant, dignified no to resignation and false comfort, accompanied by a yes to life as it exists. Freedom emerges in the ability to make decisions and define values without appealing to a higher authority. Passion is expressed through fully engaging in the present, loving, creating, and acting intensely despite knowing that ultimate outcomes are uncertain or meaningless. Camus illustrates this through Meursault in The Stranger. Meursault refuses to lie about faith or hope before his execution, showing indifference not as apathy, but as honesty toward the absurd reality of life and death. He accepts the universe's silence and finds peace in living without illusions. Similarly, Sisyphus, condemned to roll a boulder endlessly up a hill, becomes a symbol of the absurd hero. The act of struggle itself, lived with awareness and defiance, constitutes fulfillment and even happiness. In essence, the absurd hero demonstrates that life can be lived fully and courageously, even without hope of ultimate meaning or reward. By embodying revolt, freedom, and passionate presence, the absurd hero shows that the human response to the absurd is not resignation but active, conscious engagement with existence itself. While Camus' vision of the absurd life is philosophically compelling, living it is psychologically demanding. Facing the absurd, acknowledging that life has no ultimate meaning, that suffering is often senseless, and that the universe offers no guarantees, can provoke existential anxiety, despair, or even depression. Without careful balance, the conscious rejection of hope could easily tip into paralysis or suicidal ideation. Research in modern psychology suggests that some form of future-oriented motivation or goal-directed hope is crucial for mental health. Individuals who maintain belief in their ability to influence outcomes and pursue meaningful goals tend to show higher resilience, better coping with stress, and greater overall life satisfaction. From this perspective, a complete abandonment of hope appears risky, potentially undermining the very engagement that Camus philosophy values. However, the absurd life offers a way to thread the needle between philosophical rigor and psychological viability. Therapies such as acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, illustrate a similar approach, accepting the aspects of life that cannot be controlled, including suffering, mortality, and uncertainty, dropping the struggle to find ultimate solutions or guarantees, committing to act in accordance with one's chosen values, cultivating meaning through present-moment engagement. In practice, living an absurd life psychologically requires three key conditions. 1. Meaningful values and projects. These provide motivation and structure without appealing to ultimate cosmic meaning. 2. Supportive relationships or communities. Human connection offers grounding and shared purpose, reinforcing engagement despite absurdity. 3. Interpretive balance. Recognizing that life has no final guarantees does not imply that subjective experiences, achievements, or ethical actions are meaningless. In this framework, courage without metaphysical hope becomes both a philosophical and psychological stance. The absurd life is not a call to despair, but a challenge to live with clarity, responsibility, and passionate attention to the present, navigating the tension between existential honesty and the need for human motivation. Philosophically, living without hope but with courage is not merely an abstract ideal. It can take concrete shape in daily attitudes, choices, and actions. At its core, the absurd life is defined by lucid honesty, revolt, present-centered intensity, and self-made meaning. Lucid honesty requires acknowledging reality as it is, without illusions. The absurd individual recognizes that death is inevitable, suffering is real, and the universe owes nothing. By facing these truths directly, one avoids the false comfort of metaphysical guarantees while cultivating clarity and awareness. Revolt manifests as a refusal to surrender to despair or passivity. The absurd life does not resign itself to meaninglessness. Instead, it actively chooses engagement. This might mean working tirelessly in the face of challenges, creating art regardless of recognition, or standing against injustice even when ultimate victory is unlikely. Revolt is courage exercised continuously, not in anticipation of reward, but as an affirmation of life itself. Present-centered intensity emphasizes living fully in the here and now, rather than postponing fulfillment for future success, salvation, or recognition. The absurd individual immerses in today's work, relationships, and experiences. Every moment becomes an opportunity to act, create, and connect, fully aware that life offers no guaranteed outcomes. Finally, the absurd life is characterized by self-made meaning. In the absence of a cosmic script, values and purpose are chosen consciously. Actions are guided not by expectation of reward, but by intrinsic significance to oneself and others. For example, a doctor may dedicate herself to treating patients despite knowing disease will never be fully eradicated. An artist may pour energy into creations that may be forgotten. An activist may fight injustice despite fragile or temporary gains. In each case, courageous engagement replaces hope of final victory. Through these attitudes, the absurd life transforms philosophical insight into practical living. It demonstrates that one can act, love, create, and resist meaninglessness without relying on guarantees, embodying courage and dignity in a world that provides none. While Camus' vision of the absurd life is intellectually rigorous, it is not without tensions and criticisms. Philosophers and psychologists alike have questioned whether a life lived entirely without hope is sustainable or psychologically healthy. One major concern is whether complete rejection of hope is viable for humans. Critics argue that hope, even if partial or secular, is necessary to maintain motivation, resilience, and mental well-being. Religious and theistic existentialists, such as Kierkegaard and Tillich, insist that faith provides a foundation for courage, helping individuals withstand despair and anxiety. Empirical studies in psychology reinforce this view, showing that goal-directed hope correlates strongly with mental health and life satisfaction. Without some expectation of possibility, the risk of existential collapse or depression increases. Another debate concerns whether Camus implicitly reintroduces hope through human dignity and solidarity. Some scholars suggest that the values Camus emphasizes, ethical action, revolt, passion, and solidarity, function as a kind of secular hope, providing purpose and motivation without invoking metaphysics. In this sense, the absurd life may not be entirely without hope, but rather without metaphysical guarantees, leaving space for practical, human-centered optimism. Critics have also questioned whether absurd courage is itself a form of heroic self-deception. Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence, loving life as it repeats endlessly, including its suffering, demonstrates a radical affirmation of existence without hope for improvement. From this perspective, embracing absurdity might resemble a final, conscious illusion. One affirms life fully while knowing there is no ultimate meaning or reward. Finally, comparisons with Stoicism highlight important distinctions. Stoics teach acceptance of what cannot be controlled and emphasize virtue within a rational, ordered cosmos. Absurdists, in contrast, embrace revolt, tension, and passion in a non-rational, indifferent universe. Both traditions value resilience and ethical engagement, but absurdism emphasizes active confrontation with meaninglessness rather than rational detachment. These critiques underscore that living without hope, but but with courage is a demanding and unsettled philosophical problem. It requires navigating the tension between existential honesty, psychological resilience, and practical engagement, and it remains a subject of ongoing debate among philosophers, psychologists, and thinkers concerned with the human condition. Living the absurd life, without hope but with courage, is a radical stance that requires both clarity and commitment. At its core, it involves recognizing the universe's indifference. Life has no guaranteed meaning, no cosmic justice, and no ultimate reward for virtue or effort. Death and suffering are unavoidable, and the world offers no assurances. This recognition forms the foundation for authentic engagement with existence. The absurd life also demands a refusal of escapism. This includes rejecting physical suicide, which is surrender to despair, and philosophical or religious illusions, which deny the reality of the absurd. By confronting life honestly, the individual avoids both the paralysis of despair and the false comfort of metaphysical guarantees. Courage, in this context, is expressed as perpetual revolt. The absurd individual continuously affirms life by choosing to act, create, love, and resist injustice, even when ultimate victory is impossible. Revolt is not a fleeting gesture, but a consistent and conscious stance, demonstrating dignity and defiance in the face of meaninglessness. Freedom and responsibility are inseparable from this stance. Without appeal to a higher authority, the absurd individual owns their choices, values, and projects fully. Each decision becomes meaningful precisely because it is deliberate, conscious, and unmediated by illusions of cosmic reward. Finally, the absurd life emphasizes passionate presence. Happiness and fulfillment are found not in promised outcomes or metaphysical hope, but in the act of living itself, struggling, loving, creating, and engaging intensely with the present. Camus' image of Sisyphus, finding satisfaction in the act of rolling the boulder despite the absence of final victory, captures this perfectly. In summary, the absurd life is not soft optimism nor naive hope. It is a demanding form of dignity, a life lived with courage, clarity, and passion, without expectation of final reward, yet without surrender to despair. To live absurdly is to stand upright before the void, fully engaged and fully human. In a world that often promises meaning, justice, or reward, the absurd life reminds us that none of these are guaranteed. Yet, rather than leading to despair, this recognition can inspire a form of courage and freedom unlike any other. By embracing revolt, exercising radical freedom, and living with passionate intensity, the absurd individual demonstrates that life can be fully lived, even in the absence of ultimate hope. The absurd life challenges us to confront reality honestly, to act ethically, to love deeply, and to create meaning through our choices and presence. It asks for no illusions, no final victories, and no metaphysical guarantees. Only the courage to engage with life as it is. In this way, Camus' vision offers not resignation, but a profoundly human affirmation that the value of life is found not in what the universe provides, but in what we choose to do with it. Ultimately, living without hope but with courage is a call to conscious defiance, a path of dignity and intensity, and a reminder that even in a silent, indifferent world, life can be vibrant, meaningful, and worth living.